The dust rose in lazy spirals behind Ethan Harper's worn boots as he rode into the valley, his horse's hooves beating a steady rhythm against the parched earth. After 15 years of drifting from one cattle drive to another, sleeping under stars that never quite felt like home, he'd finally saved enough to buy something of his own. The deed in his vest pocket crinkled with each movement, a paper promise of belonging that he'd never quite believed possible. The ranch sprawled before him in the afternoon light, nestled between two gentle rises that sheltered it from the worst of the prairie winds. But something was wrong with the picture. The lawyer in town, a nervous little man named Cornelius Wade, had assured him the property was abandoned, left to rot after the previous owner died without heirs. Yet there, rising from the stone chimney like a defiant flag, was a thin column of smoke. Ethan reined in his horse, studying the scene with eyes trained by years of reading danger in empty landscapes. The main house, built of good timber and river stone, showed signs of recent repair. The fence posts, which should have been rotting after years of neglect, stood straight and true. Someone had been tending this place. He dismounted slowly, hand instinctively checking the position of his Colt .45. Not drawing it, he wasn't that kind of man anymore, but making sure it was there. The weight of it reminded him of all the reasons he'd wanted to leave the trail life behind. Too many nights watching for rustlers. Too many mornings counting the men who wouldn't see another sunrise. The front door opened before he could knock. A woman stood in the doorway, young but wearing the kind of weariness that had nothing to do with age. Her dress was clean, but mended in dozen places. Her hair pulled back in a severe bun that couldn't quite hide its honey color. She held a shotgun with the easy familiarity of someone who knew exactly how to use it. "You'd be Mr. Harper," she said. It wasn't a question. "I would," Ethan replied, keeping his hands visible and still. "Though I'm wondering how you'd know that. Word travels fast in a valley this small." She lowered the shotgun slightly but didn't put it aside. "We've been expecting you." "We?" Two more women appeared behind the first. The second was older, perhaps 40, with steel-gray streaks in her dark hair, and hands that spoke of hard labor. The third was older still, her face mapped with lines that told stories of sun and wind and time, but her eyes sharp as a hawk's. "I'm Mary," the young one said. "This is Ruth, and that's Eliza. We live here." Ethan felt the deed in his pocket, suddenly heavy as lead. "Ma'am, I don't mean to cause trouble, but I bought this place fair and square. Got the papers right here." "Oh, we know about your papers," Ruth said, her voice carrying an edge sharp enough to cut leather. "Question is, do you know about us?" The afternoon sun beat down on Ethan's shoulders as he stood there, caught between legal right and something more complicated. 3 women, alone on a ranch that should have been empty. His mind turned over the possibilities. None of them good. "Perhaps," Eliza said, speaking for the first time in a voice soft as aged whiskey. "You'd better come in. This is a conversation that needs shade and something cool to drink." Mary stepped back, lowering the shotgun completely. Ethan noticed how her hands trembled slightly, betraying the brave front she'd put up. He removed his hat, a gesture his mother had beaten into him 40 years ago, and stepped across the threshold. The inside of the house surprised him. He'd expected neglect, dust, the smell of abandonment. Instead, he found order. Simple furniture, handmade but solid. Curtains at the windows, mended but clean. A rag rug on the floor that spoke of long winter evenings and patient hands. This wasn't just a house. It was a home. Ruth poured water from a ceramic pitcher, the condensation on its sides promising coolness. Ethan accepted the glass gratefully, buying time to think while the women arranged themselves around the room. Mary by the door, still holding the shotgun. Ruth by the window, watching. Eliza in a rocking chair that creaked a rhythm old as time itself. "Mr. Wade didn't tell you about us," Eliza said. It wasn't a question. "No, ma'am. He said the place was abandoned. Owner died without family." "Without family, he'd claim," Ruth corrected, bitterness coloring her words. "Without family, the law would recognize." Ethan set down his glass carefully. He'd walked into something here, something with roots deeper than property lines. I think you'd better tell me the whole story. Mary and Ruth looked to Eliza, who nodded slowly. The man who owned this place was named Josiah Crane, a hard man, Mr. Harper, a man who took what he wanted and gave back nothing but pain. He was my husband, Mary said quietly. For 2 years. Mine too, Ruth added. Before Mary, for 3 years, and mine first of all, Eliza finished. For 7 years, until he decided I was too old and took another wife without bothering to put me aside legal-like. Ethan felt the truth settling over him like dust after a cattle drive. He married you all? At the same time? The law out here looks the other way at many things, Ruth said. A man with money, with influence, can do as he pleases, and it pleased Josiah to collect wives like some men collect horses. When he died, Eliza continued, that lawyer came out here quick as lightning, said the ranch would be sold, that we had no legal claim. We were just, what did he call us? Ruth? Unfortunate women, squatters, trespassers on our own land. Ethan stood, pacing to the window. Outside, he could see a vegetable garden, rows straight as rifle barrels, a chicken coop with birds scratching in the dirt, signs of life, of work, of survival. You've been here alone since he died? 6 months, Mary said. We've managed. We've had to. The whole valley knows, Ruth added. But no one helps. We're tainted, Crane's widows. They call us, like it's a disease. They're happy enough to let us starve. Long as we do it quiet-like. Ethan turned back to them. These 3 women who'd survived God knows what, who'd made a life from the scraps a dead man left behind. The deed in his pocket felt like a stone now, 30 pieces of silver for a betrayal he hadn't even known he was committing. Mr. Harper, Eliza said, we know you bought this place legal. We know we can't fight paper and law and men's ways, but we're asking you to understand. This is all we have, all we are. Mary set the shotgun aside, and Ethan saw her clearly for the first time. Young, maybe 25, with the kind of beauty that hard living hadn't quite managed to erase. But it was her eyes that caught him, green as spring grass, holding fear and pride in equal measure. We're not asking for charity, she said. We work. We've kept this place running when everyone said we couldn't. The garden, the chickens, the repairs, that's all us. We could work for you, Ruth suggested, though the words clearly cost her. Cooking, cleaning, tending the animals. You'll not find harder workers anywhere. Ethan looked at them each in turn. 3 women bound together by circumstance and survival, asking him to be something more than the law required. He thought of all the nights on the trail when he'd dreamed of a home, of belonging somewhere. He'd imagined it would be simpler than this. Ladies, he said finally, I came here looking for a fresh start. Seems to me you're doing the same. Question is, can we find a way to do it that doesn't leave anyone out in the cold? For the first time since he'd arrived, he saw hope flicker across their faces, tentative as a candle flame in the wind. Outside, the sun was beginning its descent toward the western hills, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote called, lonely sound carrying across the empty land. Ethan Harper had ridden into this valley looking for a home. What he'd found was more complicated than any property deed could define. 3 women with their own claims to this land, their own stories of survival, their own reasons for refusing to let go. And perhaps, though none of them knew it yet, the beginning of something that none of them had dared to hope for. The silence stretched between them, filled with possibility and fear in equal measure, as the day slowly gave way to the uncertain promise of night. The evening settled over the ranch like a worn quilt, bringing with it the cool promise of night. Ethan sat at the rough-hewn table, aware of every creak of the floorboards, every whisper of wind through the chinks in the walls. The 3 women moved around him with the practiced efficiency of those who'd learned to share space without collision, preparing a meal from supplies that seemed too meager for 4 people. We don't usually eat this well, Mary said quietly, setting a plate before him. Beans, cornbread, a few precious slices of salt pork. This is special circumstances. Ethan looked at the portions on their own plates, noticeably smaller than his. We'll share equal, he said, pushing some of his food toward the center of the table. If we're going to figure this out together, we start with that. Ruth's hand paused halfway to her fork. You don't have to. I know what I have to do. Ethan interrupted gently. Question is what I choose to do. They ate in relative silence at first. The only sounds, the clink of forks on plates and the distant lowing of cattle. Ethan noticed how they ate, carefully, savoring each bite as those who'd known hunger do. It twisted something in his chest, thinking of the money in his saddlebags, the supplies he could buy in town. Tell me about the ranch, he said finally. The real story, not what Wade told me. Eliza set down her fork, folding her hands in her lap. Josiah won this land in a card game 15 years ago. The man who lost it shot himself the next day. They say Josiah moved in the week after. I came first, she continued, her voice steady as a river. I was young then, foolish enough to believe his promises. He was handsome in those days, knew how to talk sweet when it suited him. We were married proper, in the church in town. For a few years, it was tolerable. What changed? Ethan asked, though he suspected he knew. I got older. Had 2 miscarriages. Then no more children came. Josiah decided I was broken, like a mare that couldn't foal. That's when he brought Ruth home. Ruth picked up the thread of the story, her voice harder than Eliza's, edged with anger that hadn't cooled. He told me Eliza was his sister, sick sister who needed caring for. I was 17, orphaned, working in a saloon in Tucson. When a rich man offers marriage and respectability, you don't ask many questions. When did you find out the truth? The wedding night, Ruth said flatly. When Eliza helped me out of my wedding dress. She told me then, told me what I'd walked into, but by then it was too late. Where would I go? What would I do? At least here there was food, a roof, another woman who understood. Mary had been silent through this, pushing beans around her plate. Now she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. I came last, 3 years ago. My family sold me. The words hung in the air like smoke. Ethan's hands clenched involuntarily. Not sold exactly, Mary corrected herself. But my father owed Josiah money, gambling debts. Josiah offered to forgive them if... She trailed off, then lifted her chin. I was the payment. God Almighty. Ethan breathed. God had nothing to do with it, Ruth said sharply. Men did this, men and their laws and their wants. We survived him, Eliza said, her calm voice smoothing over Ruth's sharp edges. That's what matters. We survived him and we survived after him. When he died? How did he die? Ethan interrupted, then caught himself. Sorry, that was thoughtless. No, it's a fair question. Eliza said, he fell from his horse, broke his neck clean. Some say the horse was spooked. Some say he was drunk. We say it was God's own justice. Finally come due. We thought we were free then, Mary added. But the law says we were never really married. Ruth finished. All of us at once, that's bigamy. Makes the marriages invalid. Makes us nothing in the eyes of the court. Ethan pushed his empty plate away, his appetite gone. So Wade knew. He sold me this place knowing you were here, knowing you had no legal claim but every moral right to it. Mr. Wade is a practical man, Eliza said diplomatically. He saw an empty ranch going to seed and a buyer with ready money. Why complicate things with inconvenient truths? The lamp on the table flickered, casting dancing shadows on the walls. Outside, night had fully claimed the valley. Ethan could hear the sounds of the ranch settling into darkness, horses shifting in the corral, chickens roosting, the endless whisper of wind across grass. What did you think would happen? He asked. When I showed up, the women exchanged glances, a whole conversation in looks alone. We hoped you might be a decent man, Mary said finally. Someone who'd give us time to find somewhere else. And if I wasn't, Ruth's hand moved unconsciously to her hip, where Ethan noticed for the first time the outline of a knife beneath her apron. "We've survived worse than being thrown off land. Mr. Harper, we'd survive that too. But you're tired of just surviving." Ethan said it wasn't a question. He could see it in the slump of Mary's shoulders, the lines around Ruth's mouth, the careful way Eliza held herself, as if she might break if she relaxed too much. "Wouldn't you be?" Ruth challenged. Ethan thought of his own years on the trail, the bone-deep weariness that came from never belonging anywhere, never having a place to truly rest. "Yes," he said simply. "I would be, I am." They cleared the dishes together, another dance of shared space and careful distance. Ethan noticed the small things, how Mary flinched when he moved too suddenly, how Ruth kept herself between him and the others, how Eliza watched everything with those sharp eyes that missed nothing. "Where will you sleep?" Eliza asked as they finished. "Josiah's room is... we haven't..." "I'll bed down in the barn," Ethan said quickly. "Until we sort things out, seems proper." Relief flickered across their faces, quickly hidden but not quickly enough. "There's clean hay in the loft," Mary offered. "And blankets. I'll fetch them." "I can manage," Ethan said, but she was already moving, glad perhaps to have something to do. As he gathered his things, Ruth stopped him with a hand on his arm. He felt her trembling through the contact, saw the effort it took her not to pull away. "Why?" she asked. "Why aren't you throwing us out? You have every legal right." Ethan considered his answer carefully. "My mother raised me on a homestead in Kansas. When my father died, the bank tried to take it. Would have too, except the neighbors pitched in. Helped her prove up the claim. She used to say that legal right and doing right weren't always the same thing." "Your mother sounds like a wise woman," Eliza said from her chair. "She was," Ethan agreed. "She'd have liked you three. I think would have said you had sand." Mary returned with an armload of blankets, pressing them into his hands. Up close, he could smell the lavender she'd packed them with, see the careful darning where they'd been mended. "These are too good for a barn," he protested. "Nothing's too good for kindness," Mary said softly, then colored as if she'd said too much. Ethan made his way to the barn, finding it like everything else on the ranch, worn but well tended. The horses whickered a greeting as he climbed to the loft. Through the gaps in the boards, he could see lamplight in the house windows, shadows moving behind curtains as the women prepared for bed. He spread the blankets on the hay, thinking about the strange turn his new beginning had taken. He'd ridden in expecting emptiness, solitude, a chance to build something from nothing. Instead, he'd found a life already in progress, a home already made, just waiting for someone to recognize its worth. As he settled into the hay, Ethan could hear voices drifting from the house. Not the words, just the rhythm of women talking, planning, maybe hoping. Tomorrow would bring decisions, complications, the need to find a way forward that honored both law and justice. But tonight, for the first time in longer than he cared to remember, Ethan Harper fell asleep to the sound of home. The stars wheeled overhead, silent witnesses to the strange constellation forming below. 3 widows who weren't really widows, and a would-be rancher who'd found something more valuable than land. In the morning, they'd have to figure out what came next. But for now, the night held them all in its vast embrace, equal under its darkness, bound by nothing more and nothing less than the choice to see each other as human. The morning sun streamed through the barn's slats, painting golden lines across Ethan's face. He woke to the sound of activity, chickens clucking, the ring of an axe on wood, voices carrying on the crisp air. For a moment, he forgot where he was. Then memory flooded back. The 3 widows, the complicated truth of his new home. He descended from the loft to find Mary at the well, hauling up water with thin arms that shook with the effort. Without thinking, he moved to help, his hands closing over hers on the rope. She jerked back as if burned, the bucket splashing water across both their feet. "I'm sorry," they said in unison, then stopped, embarrassed. "I didn't mean to startle you," Ethan said, stepping back to give her space. "Just looked like you could use a hand." Mary's face was pink. Whether from exertion or embarrassment, he couldn't tell. "I manage fine on my own. Been doing it for months." "I can see that," Ethan said carefully. "But you don't have to anymore." "Not while I'm here." She studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Together, they hauled up the bucket, Mary showing him the trick of the stubborn pulley, Ethan careful to let her lead. Ruth emerged from the chicken coop, a basket of eggs balanced on her hip. She stopped short seeing them together, her eyes narrowing slightly. "Morning, Mr. Harper. Sleep well?" "Well enough," Ethan replied. "And it's just Ethan. Mr. Harper was my father." "Ethan, then," Ruth said, though the name came reluctantly to her lips. "Breakfast is cooking if you're hungry." The kitchen was warm with the heat of the stove and the smell of biscuits baking. Eliza stood at the table, kneading dough with practiced hands. She looked up as they entered, flour dusting her cheeks. "Ah, our guest is awake. Sit, sit. Coffee's hot." "I'm not a guest," Ethan said, accepting the steaming cup gratefully. "Guests don't stay. I'm not sure what I am yet, but I'm not passing through." The women exchanged those speaking glances again. Ethan was beginning to recognize them, the silent communication of people who'd learned to understand each other without words. A survival skill in a house where the wrong word could mean pain. "About that," Ruth said, setting the eggs down with careful precision. "We've been talking. In the middle of the night." Mary added, "When we should have been sleeping." "Hush, child," Eliza said gently. "What Ruth means is, we have a proposition." Ethan set down his coffee, giving them his full attention. The morning light caught the silver in Eliza's hair, the determined set of Ruth's jaw, the hope barely hidden in Mary's eyes. "We want to make you an offer," Eliza continued. "A business arrangement, you might say." "I'm listening." Ruth took over, her voice steady and matter-of-fact. "This ranch is bigger than it looks. Josiah had ambitions, bought up parcels of land whenever he could, sometimes in ways that weren't entirely above board. There's good grazing land to the south, water rights to Copper Creek, timber stands in the hills. More than one man can work, or 3 women," Mary added quietly. "Or 3 women," Ruth agreed. "But we know the land, every spring, every trail, every place the cattle like to hide when storms come. We know which neighbors can be trusted and which would steal you blind. We know when to plant and when to harvest, where to find wild herbs when the animals sicken." "Knowledge I don't have," Ethan said, beginning to see where this was heading. "Exactly," Eliza said. "You have the legal claim. We have the knowledge. Separately, we both lose. Together. Together we might make something work." Ethan finished. They served breakfast, eggs, biscuits, gravy made from last night's pan drippings. Simple fare, but Ethan noticed how they made it stretch, how each plate was carefully portioned. He thought again of his money, of what it could buy. "There's something else," he said as they ate. "I didn't come here empty-handed. Got money saved, enough to buy supplies, maybe some cattle to add to whatever's left of the herd." Mary's fork stilled. "Josiah's creditors took most of the cattle, claimed debts. We've got maybe 20 head left, and those only because we hid them in Skeleton Canyon." "Skeleton Canyon?" "Box Canyon about 5 miles north," Ruth explained. "Good grass, water, only one way in or out. Josiah used to hide stolen cattle there, before he got respectable." Ethan filed that information away. A man who'd steal cattle would steal other things too. No wonder the women were careful. "So, we'd be starting almost from scratch," he said. "Does that change things?" Eliza asked carefully. Ethan thought about it. A nearly empty ranch, 3 women with no legal claim, a past full of shadows. Any sensible man would walk away, but then sensible men didn't drift for 15 years looking for something they couldn't name. "No," he said finally. "Just means we've got work to do." The relief in the room was palpable. Mary actually smiled, a quick flash that transformed her face. Ruth's shoulders relaxed a fraction. Even Eliza's eternal composure cracked enough to show the worry she'd been hiding. "There are conditions?" Ruth said. Because of course there were. Ruth. Ethan was learning. Was the protector. The one who looked for dangers and planned for contingencies. "Tell me." "We're partners, not hired help. Equal say in decisions about the ranch." "Fair enough. We keep separate quarters. You can have Josiah's room now if you want it, but the rest of the house remains ours." Ethan thought of the empty bedroom they'd mentioned, the one they couldn't bring themselves to clear out. "I'll stick with the barn for now. When we build, we'll add on, make proper spaces for everyone." "When we build?" Mary echoed, something wondering in her voice. "Ranch this size needs more than one house," Ethan said. "Bunkhouse for hired hands eventually. Maybe separate cabins for privacy." The unspoken hung in the air. Separate cabins for if any of them wanted to marry. For futures none of them could quite envision yet. "And the last condition?" Ethan asked, sensing there was more. Ruth and Mary looked to Eliza, who folded her hands carefully. "We need to go to town, all of us together. Show people where we stand." Ethan understood immediately. 3 women alone were vulnerable. 3 women with a man's protection, even if that protection was more show than substance, or something else. "When?" "Today. If you're willing, we need supplies. And..." Eliza paused. "And people need to see that we're not alone anymore, that someone chose to stand with us." "Not someone," Ethan corrected. "A partner, and partners stand together." Mary made a small sound, quickly suppressed. Ruth's hard expression softened just a fraction. Eliza nodded slowly, regally, like a queen accepting an oath of fealty. They cleaned up breakfast together, Ethan learning the rhythm of their movements, the unspoken divisions of labor. Mary washed, Ruth dried, Eliza put away. He carried water, stoked the stove, small tasks that felt monumental in their ordinariness. "I'll hitch the wagon," he offered. "I'll help," Mary said quickly, then colored again. I know which horses work best together." They walked to the barn in comfortable silence. The morning was warming, promising another hot day. Ethan could see the garden better in daylight. Rows of vegetables fighting the arid soil, corn stalks reaching skyward, bean plants climbing makeshift trellises. "You did all this?" he asked. "Eliza, mostly. She has a way with growing things. Ruth handles the animals. Mary paused. "I do what needs doing." "Seems to me you all do that." In the barn, Mary showed him the 2 horses, a matched pair of bays named Moses and Aaron. "Josiah named them," she said it was blasphemous, but he liked the joke of it. They worked together to harness the horses, Mary's small hands surprisingly strong and sure. When their fingers brushed over a buckle, neither pulled away quite as quickly as they might have. "Can I ask you something?" Mary said suddenly. "Ask. Why didn't you throw us out? Really?" Ethan considered his words carefully. "You ever been someplace and known, deep in your bones, that you were meant to be there?" Mary nodded slowly. "That's how I felt when I saw the 3 of you yesterday. Like I'd been riding toward this moment my whole life. Maybe that sounds foolish." "No," Mary interrupted. "No, it doesn't sound foolish at all." They finished with the horses in silence, but it was a different silence than before. Warmer, full of possibility. The wagon was loaded with empty crates and worn baskets, ready to be filled with supplies. Ruth emerged wearing her best dress, still mended and faded, but clean and pressed. Eliza wore a bonnet that had seen better days but still retained a hint of its former elegance. Mary had found a ribbon for her hair somewhere, a small touch of beauty that made Ethan's chest tight. "Ready?" he asked, offering his hand to help them into the wagon. Eliza accepted with dignity, Ruth with reluctance, Mary with a shy smile that she quickly hid. As Ethan took up the reins, he felt the weight of what they were about to do. Going to town together, presenting themselves as a unit. There would be talk. There would be judgment. There might even be trouble. But looking at the 3 women beside him, survivors all. Each carrying scars he was only beginning to understand. He knew there was no other choice. They'd found each other in this unlikely place, at this unlikely time. Now they had to find a way to make it work. "Let's go to town," he said, and clicked the horses into motion. The ranch fell away behind them, but none of them looked back. They were too busy looking forward, toward whatever came next. Together, the town of Cedar Ridge squatted on the valley floor like a dusty toad, all wooden facades and false fronts trying to look bigger than they were. As the wagon rolled down Main Street, Ethan felt the weight of eyes from every doorway and window. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. A woman pulling her child into Mackenzie's dry goods moved with the urgency of someone avoiding contagion. "Steady," Eliza murmured, though whether to him or the younger women, Ethan couldn't tell. He pulled the wagon up in front of Patterson's general store. The boardwalk, which had been busy with Saturday shoppers, cleared as if by magic. Ethan set the brake with deliberate calm, then climbed down to help the women from the wagon. "Head high, Mary," Ruth whispered as Ethan handed her down. "We've done nothing wrong." But knowledge and feeling were different things. Ethan could see the tremor in Mary's hands, the way Ruth's jaw clenched tight enough to crack teeth. Only Eliza seemed unaffected, moving with the same quiet dignity she might have shown at a church social. The bell above Patterson's door chimed their entrance. Samuel Patterson, a thin man with the face of an unsuccessful undertaker, looked up from his ledger. His welcoming merchant smile died when he saw who'd entered. "Ladies," he said, the word dropping like something distasteful. His eyes shifted to Ethan, showing a mixture of confusion and calculation. "And you'd be—" "Ethan Harper. I bought the Crane place." "Ah." Patterson's expression shifted again, this time to something almost pitying. "I see. And you're here with them?" "With my partners," Ethan said evenly. "We need supplies." The word partners rippled through the store. Mrs. Wellington, examining bolts of fabric, dropped the cloth as if it had burned her. Her daughter, a pretty girl about Mary's age, stared openly until her mother yanked her toward the door. "Perhaps we should discuss this privately," Patterson suggested, his eyes darting between Ethan and the women. "Nothing private about buying flour and coffee," Ruth said, her voice steady as iron. "Unless you're not selling to us anymore." "Mr. Patterson." Patterson's Adam's apple bobbed. "Now, Ruth, Mrs. Crane, I never said—" "Mrs. Beckett," Ruth corrected. "I was Ruth Beckett before I came here, and that's who I am again." "We have a list," Eliza interrupted smoothly, producing a carefully written paper. "If you'll fill it, we'll be on our way." Patterson took the list with obvious reluctance. As he moved to gather items, other customers edged toward the door. Soon, only the four of them remained in the store that had been bustling minutes before. "I'll get the feed from Murphy's," Ethan said. "You ladies finish here." "You don't have to," Mary started. "Partners," Ethan reminded her. "I'll be right back." Outside, the sun beat down mercilessly. Ethan could feel the town's attention like ants on his skin. At Murphy's Feeding Grain, he found a warmer reception. Barely. Tom Murphy at least had the grace to look embarrassed as he loaded sacks of oats and corn. "Heard you bought the Crane place," Murphy said, not quite meeting Ethan's eyes. "I did. Those women, they tell you the whole story?" "They told me enough." Murphy hefted another sack, grunting with effort. "Josiah Crane was a hard man. What he did wasn't right, but those women, staying on after, people talk." "People always talk," Ethan said. "Doesn't make them right." "Maybe not, but talk has a way of becoming truth out here. You'd do better to send them on their way. Start fresh. I could introduce you to my niece. Good girl, never been married. The only introducing I need is to merchants who'll treat my partners fairly." Ethan cut him off. "Can you do that, or should I take my business elsewhere?" Murphy's face reddened. "No need for that. Your money's good here." But his movements were sharper as he finished loading, and he didn't offer to help carry the sacks to the wagon. Ethan was hefting the feed when he heard raised voices from Patterson's. He dropped the sack and ran, bootfalls echoing on the boardwalk. Inside, he found chaos. Ruth stood between Mary and a well-dressed man whose face was twisted with anger. Mary was pressed against the counter, tears streaming down her face. Eliza faced off with an older woman in black bombazine who could only be the infamous Mrs. "Wellington, told you never to show your faces here again," the man was shouting. "Shameless Jezebels!" "That's enough." Ethan's voice cut through the noise like a whip crack. The man turned, revealing a soft face going to jowls, eyes bright with righteous fury. "And you'd be the fool who took them in? Do you know what these women are?" "I know they're under my protection," Ethan said, moving to put himself between the man and Ruth. "And I know you're about to apologize and leave." "Apologize?" The man's voice climbed toward hysteria. "To these scarlet women? They lived in sin with Josiah Crane. All three of them. In the same house." "Against their will," Ethan said quietly. "Or doesn't that matter to you? They could have left, could have maintained their virtue. Instead they stayed, lived like women trying to survive?" Eliza's calm voice interrupted. "Like human beings doing what they must to keep food in their stomachs and roofs over their heads? Mrs. Wellington drew herself up. "No decent woman would have stayed. Death before dishonor." Easy words from someone who's never faced the choice. Ruth said bitterly, "Did you bury your husband? Mrs. Wellington, mourn him in comfort, with your children around you and your house secure? How fortunate for you. How dare you compare? How dare you judge?" Ruth shot back, "You who've never wondered where your next meal would come from. You who've never had to choose between degradation and starvation." "We should go," Mary whispered, tugging at Ruth's sleeve. "Please, let's just go. Not without our supplies," Ethan said firmly. He turned to Patterson, who'd been watching like a man at a hanging. "You filled that order yet?" That is..." Patterson looked around the store as if seeking escape. "It's a simple question. Yes or no?" "The thing is," Patterson stammered, "if I serve them, Mrs. Wellington and her ladies will what? Take their business to the other general store?" Ethan asked. "Oh, wait, there isn't one. Stop acting like a scared rabbit and fill the order." Patterson looked between Mrs. Wellington's furious face and Ethan's steady gaze. Greed won, as Ethan had suspected it might. He began gathering items with hurried movements. The soft-faced man, who Ethan had now identified as Mrs. Wellington's son, stepped forward again. "You're making a mistake. Mister, these women are poison. They'll drag you down with them. Only poison I see here is small minds and smaller hearts." Ethan replied, "Now step aside." Young Wellington's hand twitched toward his hip, where a small pistol rested. Ethan's hand moved too, resting on his colt. The room froze. "Jonathan," his mother said sharply, "we're leaving. We won't shop where such creatures are welcomed." They swept out in a rustle of fabric and indignation. Patterson's hands shook as he tallied the bill. "That'll be $12.40, he said quietly. Ethan paid without haggling, though he noticed the prices were higher than they should be. The cost of standing with the wrong people, he supposed. They loaded the supplies in silence, aware of the eyes watching from every window. As Ethan helped Mary into the wagon, she whispered, "I'm sorry, we shouldn't have come." "You have every right to be here," Ethan said firmly. "Don't let them make you think otherwise." As they pulled away from the store, a stone flew from an alley, striking the wagon bed. Then another. Ethan's hands tightened on the reins, but he kept the horses to a steady walk. Running would only encourage them. "Whores!" someone shouted. "Get out of our town!" Mary flinched. Ruth's face went white with rage, but it was Eliza who surprised him, standing up in the moving wagon with perfect balance. "We are leaving," she called out, her voice carrying clearly. "But we'll be back every week, every month, as long as we live, because this is our home, whether you like it or not, and we don't scare easy." She sat back down as if she'd simply been admiring the view. Ethan caught her eye and saw steel there, the kind forged in fires most people couldn't imagine. They were almost to the edge of town when Sheriff Daniels stepped into the street. Ethan pulled up, wondering if this was where their day went from bad to worse. The sheriff was a big man going gray, with the look of someone who'd seen too much and liked too little of it. Ethan Harper? That's right. Heard there was some trouble at Patterson's. No trouble we started. Daniels sighed, pushing his hat back. Maybe not, but trouble finds some folks easier than others. He looked at the women, his expression unreadable. You planning to stay at the Crane place? The Harper place, Ethan corrected. And yes, all of you. All of us. Daniels chewed on that for a moment. It's not illegal. What you're doing. Want to make that clear, but not illegal and welcome are two different things. We've noticed, Ruth said dryly. I keep the peace in this town, Daniels continued. That means protecting everyone, regardless of what folks think of them. But I can't be everywhere. You understand what I'm saying? We can protect ourselves. Ethan said, Maybe, but 4 people on a ranch 5 miles from town. Lot can happen before help arrives. Is that a threat, Sheriff? A warning. There's talk already. Curtis Malone was in town yesterday, asking about the Crane place. Seemed mighty interested when he heard you'd bought it. The women exchanged glances. Curtis Malone, land grabber, cattle baron, the kind of man who collected ranches like some men collected scalps. We'll be careful, Ethan said. Daniel stepped aside. See that you are... I'd hate to be investigating murders instead of breaking up store arguments. They rode home in thoughtful silence, each lost in their own concerns. As the ranch came into view, Ethan heard Mary release a breath she'd been holding. Home, she said softly, then colored as if she'd revealed too much. Home, Ethan agreed, and meant it more than he'd meant anything in his life. The days after their trip to town settled into a wary routine. Ethan threw himself into the work of the ranch, trying to assess what they had and what they needed. The women went about their tasks with one eye always on the horizon, watching for trouble that they all knew would come. It was Ruth who spotted the riders first. She was checking the fence line near the creek when the dust cloud appeared, moving fast from the direction of town. She ran back to the house, her skirts hiked up, moving with an urgency that brought everyone to the porch. How many? Ethan asked, already checking his rifle. 6, maybe 7. Ruth panted. Coming hard. Get inside. Ethan ordered. Bar the windows. We're not hiding, Ruth said flatly. This is our home too. Ruth's right, Eliza said, emerging from the house with the shotgun. We face this together. Mary appeared with another rifle, her hands steady despite the fear in her eyes. They arranged themselves on the porch, Ethan in the center, the women flanking him, a united front against whatever was coming. The riders thundered into the yard, horses lathered with sweat. At their head rode a man who could only be Curtis Malone. He was big, broader than Ethan, with the kind of prosperous belly that came from other men's labor. His clothes were fine, too fine for ranch work, and his silver-studded saddle probably cost more than most cowboys saw in a year. Harper, Malone said without preamble. Heard you bought this place? Word travels fast, Ethan replied, keeping his voice neutral. Malone's eyes swept over the women, lingering too long on Mary. Also heard you kept Crane's leftovers. Ethan felt Ruth tense beside him. Careful, he warned quietly. Oh, I'm always careful. Malone smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Careful enough to know this ranch is worth more than you paid for it. Careful enough to know Wade didn't tell you everything. Such as? Such as Josiah owed me money. Quite a bit of money. Gambling debts, bad investments. I hold markers worth more than this whole spread. Then you should have collected from Josiah, Eliza said calmly. Dead men's debts die with them, unless you have papers saying otherwise. Malone's smile widened. Smart woman. But you see, I do have papers. Josiah put this ranch up as collateral, signed and witnessed. He produced a document from his coat, holding it just out of reach. Ethan could see official-looking seals, Josiah's spidery signature. "That's a forgery," Ruth said immediately. "Josiah never—" "Never what?" Malone interrupted. "Never got desperate enough? Never drank enough to make foolish bets? You women lived with him. You know what he was capable of." The truth of that statement hung in the air like smoke. They did know what Josiah was capable of. Cruelty, deception, worse things that went unspoken. "Even if that paper's real," Ethan said. "I bought this place free and clear. Wade said there were no liens." "Wade says what I pay him to say," Malone replied casually. "But I'm not an unreasonable man. I could let you keep the ranch." "For a price." "What price?" Malone's eyes went to the women again, and Ethan felt his blood run cold. "Well now, that depends. These ladies have no legal claim here. Send them packing, and we can work out a reasonable payment plan. Keep them—" He shrugged. "Things get complicated. The only thing leaving this ranch is you," Ethan said quietly. "In about 10 seconds. Malone's men shifted, hands moving to weapons. Ethan counted 6 of them, all armed, all with the look of men who'd killed before and would again. "That's unfriendly. Harper, downright hostile. 5 seconds. You can't fight the whole valley," Malone warned. "I own half the water rights, control the best grazing. I can make life very difficult for you." 2 seconds. Malone's face darkened. "You're making a mistake. These whores aren't worth—" The crack of Ruth's rifle cut him off. The bullet whined past Malone's ear, close enough to clip a strand of his carefully pomaded hair. His horse reared, nearly unseating him. "The next one won't miss," Ruth said conversationally. "And before your boys clear leather, remember, we've got cover and you don't." It was true. The porch provided protection while the riders were exposed in the open yard. Malone's men looked uncertain, calculating odds. "This isn't over," Malone snarled, fighting to control his mount. "You think you're being noble? You're just another fool taken in by a pretty face and a sad story. When you come to your senses, and you will, my offer won't be so generous." He wheeled his horse around, his men following. But at the gate, he turned back. "Ask them about Josiah's death. Harper, ask them where they were when he fell off that horse. Ask them why the horse came back with blood on the saddle, Josiah's blood, but no wounds on the animal." Then they were gone, dust settling in their wake. Mary lowered her rifle with shaking hands. "He knows. God help us. He knows. He suspects," Eliza corrected. But her face was pale. "Suspicion isn't proof." Ethan looked between them, pieces clicking into place. The horse that spooked, the convenient accident. 3 women who'd suffered under a cruel man, and that man's sudden death. "Inside," he said quietly. "We need to talk." They gathered in the kitchen, the room that had become their neutral ground. Ethan waited while Eliza made coffee with hands that trembled slightly. When they were all seated, he asked the question that had to be asked. "Did you kill him?" The silence stretched like taffy. Finally, Ruth spoke. "Would it matter if we did? I need to know what I'm defending." "You're defending us," Mary said, tears starting down her cheeks. "Isn't that enough?" "Mary," Eliza said gently. Then, to Ethan, "You want the truth? The truth is, Josiah was drunk that day. The truth is, he was angry because Mary had locked her door against him the night before. The truth is, he said he was going to teach her a lesson she'd never forget." Ethan's hands clenched around his coffee cup. "The truth is," Ruth took up the tale, "he saddled his horse rough, jerking the cinch too tight. The animal was already skittish. The truth is, we were terrified what he'd do when he got back." "And?" Ethan prompted. "And he never got back," Eliza finished. "His horse returned hours later. We found Josiah's body at the bottom of Widow's Creek Ravine, neck broken. The blood on the saddle? From his head. Hit a rock on the way down. We figured—" Ethan studied their faces. 3 women bound by shared suffering, shared secrets. "That's the truth?" "That's what happened," Ruth said, meeting his eyes steadily. It wasn't quite an answer, but Ethan understood. Some truths were too dangerous to speak aloud. Some justice came from unexpected places. Malone thinks you killed him. Malone thinks what suits his purposes, Eliza said. If he truly believed we were murderers, would he want to do business with you? No, he's using suspicion as a weapon. He'll be back, Ethan said. Yes, Ruth agreed. But now we know what we're facing. He wants the ranch, and he'll use any means to get it. The paper he showed. Could it be real? The women exchanged glances. Maybe, Eliza admitted. Josiah gambled when he drank, lost more than he won. Toward the end, when creditors were pressing, he might have signed anything, Ruth finished. We weren't privy to his business dealings. Ethan rubbed his face, feeling the weight of complications. He'd wanted a simple life, a fresh start. Instead, he'd inherited a maze of debts, threats, and secrets. I'm sorry, Mary said softly. You don't deserve this trouble. We've brought you nothing but— Stop, Ethan interrupted. You've brought me a home. You've brought me purpose. That's worth any trouble. Even if we're— Mary couldn't finish. Even if you're what? Survivors? Fighters? Women who did what you had to do to stay alive? Ethan stood, pacing to the window. I've known men who've done worse for less reason. Whatever happened to Josiah? He brought it on himself. You don't know that, Ruth said. Don't I? Ethan turned back to them. I know he forced Mary into marriage to pay a debt. I know he kept 3 women prisoner in all but name. I know what kind of man does that, and I know what kind of end they usually meet. So you'll stay? Eliza asked. Even knowing Malone will make trouble? Even with the town against us? Try to make me leave, Ethan said simply. Mary made a small sound. Hope or fear or something between. Ruth's shoulders straightened. Eliza smiled, the first real smile he'd seen from her. Then we'd better prepare, she said practically. Malone won't wait long to make his next move. They spent the rest of the day making plans, checking weapons, counting ammunition, discussing which neighbors might help and which would side with Malone. The work felt different now, not just survival but preparation for war. As the sun set, painting the sky in shades of blood and gold, Ethan stood on the porch watching the horizon. Mary joined him, moving quiet as a shadow. Do you regret it? She asked. Coming here? Do you regret surviving? He countered. She thought about it. No. Whatever else I've done, whatever else I've endured, I'm alive. That has to count for something. It counts for everything, Ethan said. They stood together as darkness fell. 2 people who'd found each other at the edge of nowhere, preparing to defend the home they'd all claimed. Inside. Ruth and Eliza moved about, securing the house for the night. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new threats, but tonight they were together. 4 souls against the world, bound by choice rather than law, by loyalty rather than paper. It wasn't the fresh start Ethan had imagined, but perhaps it was the one he'd needed, complex and dangerous and real as the land itself. The attack started small. First, someone poisoned the well, not enough to kill, but enough to make them sick for days. Ethan and Ruth spent hours hauling clean water from the creek while Mary and Eliza nursed everyone through the worst of it. Then came the cut fence lines, letting what little cattle they had scatter across the valley. It took 3 days to round them up, and they lost 2 head to wolves in the process. Malone's testing us, Ruth said one evening, mending yet another slashed rope. Seeing how much we can take before we break. Or before we make a mistake, Eliza added, looking meaningfully at Ethan's rifle propped by the door. He wants us to retaliate, give him excuse to come at us directly. They were gathered in the kitchen after another long day of repairs. The constant harassment was wearing on them all. Mary jumped at every sound. Ruth's temper grew shorter, and even Eliza's eternal calm showed cracks. We can't just keep taking it, Ethan argued. Eventually, he'll escalate beyond what we can handle. Then what do you suggest? Ruth demanded. Ride into town and call him out? That's what he wants. You dead and us defenseless. Before Ethan could respond, horses thundered into the yard. They scrambled for weapons, But the voice that called out wasn't Malone's. "Harper, you in there?" Ethan recognized Tom Murphy from the feed store. Cautiously, he stepped onto the porch. Murphy sat his horse uneasily, glancing around as if Malone's men might materialize from the shadows. "Tom, kinda late for a social call." "This ain't social." Murphy dismounted, tying his horse with nervous movements. "I came to warn you. There's talk in town. Bad talk." "There's always talk," Ruth said from the doorway. Murphy's eyes skittered past her. "This is different. Malone's been spreading money around, buying drinks, making friends. He's got folks convinced that this place is a den of iniquity." "And," Ethan prompted, "and some of the more righteous folks are talking about cleaning up the valley. Reverend Dobson's been preaching about sin and judgment. Mrs. Wellington's women's group is demanding action." Murphy swallowed hard. "They're planning something. Tomorrow night. Maybe the night after." "What kind of something?" Eliza asked quietly. "The kind that involves torches and rope." Murphy said bluntly, "I may not approve of your arrangement here, but I don't hold with mob justice either. Thought you should know." "Why?" Ruth's voice was sharp with suspicion. "Why warn us?" Murphy shifted uncomfortably. "My Sarah, my wife. She was friends with Mary once. Before everything. She says Mary was a good girl who got dealt a bad hand. Sarah would never forgive me if I let harm come without warning." "Thank Sarah for us," Mary said softly. Murphy nodded and turned to go, then paused. "There might be some who'd stand with you. Not many, but some. The Hendersons remember when you helped birth their son. Eliza, old Sam Martinez says Ruth doctored his horse when no one else would touch it. You've got more friends than you know. They're just scared to show it." After he left, they sat in heavy silence. The threat of Malone was one thing, a known enemy with clear motives, but a mob of townspeople, driven by righteous fury and Malone's manipulations, that was something else entirely. "We should leave," Mary said finally. "Tonight, pack what we can and go where?" Ruth interrupted. "With what money? To face the same treatment in the next town? And the next?" "Ruth's right," Eliza said. "Running solves nothing. We've done it before. All of us. This time, we stand." "Even if standing gets us killed?" Mary's voice broke. "Especially then," Ethan said firmly, "because if we run now, we'll never stop running. And that's no life at all." They spent the night preparing, not just weapons and defenses, but other things too. Ethan wrote a letter to his lawyer brother in St. Louis, detailing everything in case the worst happened. The women packed their few precious possessions, not to flee but to preserve what mattered if the house burned. Dawn came without incident, but the day had a waiting quality, like the air before a storm. They went about their chores with one eye always on the horizon. Every dust cloud might be riders. Every distant sound might be the mob gathering. It was late afternoon when unexpected visitors arrived. A small wagon creaked up the road, driven by an elderly Mexican man. Beside him sat a young woman with a baby, and in the back, an older couple Ethan recognized as the Hendersons. "Sam Martinez." The driver introduced himself. "This is my daughter Rosa and her little one. The Hendersons, you know. We're not here to cause trouble." "Mrs." Henderson said quickly. But Tom Murphy said, "That is, we heard. We came to help." Her husband finished bluntly. "Don't hold with mobs. Don't hold with Malone either, buying up the valley piece by piece." More arrived as the sun lowered. Not many. A handful of Mexican vaqueros who remembered Ruth's kindness. A young couple who had eloped against their family's wishes and understood judgment. Old Sarah Murphy defying her husband's caution. Less than 20 in all, but they came. "This is foolish," Ruth said, though her eyes were bright with unshed tears. "You're risking everything for us, for neighbors," Sam Martinez corrected. "For what's right." They arranged themselves as best they could. The vaqueros took positions around the property. The women prepared water buckets in case of fire. Ethan checked and rechecked weapons, handing them out to anyone who could shoot. The sun was bleeding red across the horizon when the mob finally came. They heard them before they saw them, voices raised in hymns that sounded more like war cries. Torchlight flickered through the gathering dusk, a river of fire flowing down from town. "Must be 40 of them," one of the vaqueros reported. "Maybe 50. "Stand firm," Ethan called out. "Nobody shoots unless they do." The mob stopped at the property line, milling uncertainly. They'd expected to find 4 people cowering. Instead, they faced armed defenders, windows barricaded, a small but determined force. Reverend Dobson pushed to the front, his usually mild face twisted with zealous fervor. "Ethan Harper, send out those Jezebels and save yourself. The Lord's judgment will not be denied. The Lord's judgment is his to give." Eliza called back, "Not yours to deliver. Silence, woman. You who lived in sin dare quote scripture. I who survived dare speak truth." Eliza replied, "Where were you, Reverend, when Josiah Crane bought Mary like cattle? Where was your righteousness when Ruth cried for help? You looked away then. Don't pretend to holy purpose now." "Enough talk," someone shouted. "Burn them out." But as the mob surged forward, Sheriff Daniels appeared on horseback, badge glinting in the torchlight. Behind him rode 6 deputies, all armed, all grim-faced. "That's far enough," Daniels announced. "This is still my jurisdiction, and I'll have no lynching." "We seek only justice," Reverend Dobson protested. "You seek violence," Daniels corrected. "And I won't have it. Disperse now, or I'll arrest every last one of you for attempted murder." "You'd protect these sinners?" "Mrs." Wellington shrilled from somewhere in the crowd. "I'd protect anyone from mob rule," Daniels said firmly. "That's my job. Now get moving, or spend the night in jail." The mob wavered. Some had come for easy violence against the defenseless. Faced with armed resistance and the law's opposition, their courage faltered. They began to drift away in 2s and 3s, though not without muttered threats and promises of future reckoning. "This isn't over," someone called out. "No," Daniels agreed. "But it is for tonight, and tomorrow night, and any night I wear this badge." When the last torch had disappeared into the darkness, the sheriff turned to Ethan. "Can't do this every time. Harper won't always get warning. I know, and thank you." Daniels shrugged. "Don't thank me yet. Malone's not done, and neither are the good people of Cedar Ridge. You've bought time, nothing more." After the sheriff left, their defenders began to drift away too. The Hendersons pressed Eliza's hand wordlessly. Sam Martinez promised his vaqueros would keep watch in shifts. Sarah Murphy hugged Mary quickly before her courage failed. "You're not alone," she whispered. "Remember that." When everyone had gone, the 4 of them stood in the yard, looking at the trampled ground where the mob had gathered, evidence of how close they'd come to disaster. "They'll be back," Ruth said unnecessarily. "Yes," Ethan agreed, "but not tonight, and not finding us unprepared again." "We can't ask those people to risk themselves every time," Mary said. "It's not fair to them." "Fair," Eliza mused. Such a small word for such a big concept. Was it fair when Josiah bought you? When the town turned its back on us? When Malone decided he wanted our home? "Our home," Mary repeated, testing the words. "Is that what this is now?" "If we want it to be," Ethan said. "If we're willing to fight for it." They went inside together, barring the door against the night. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new threats. Malone wouldn't give up, and neither would the town's moral guardians. But tonight, they were still here, still together. 4 people who'd found each other in the wreckage of their separate lives and chosen to build something new. It wasn't safe or easy or simple, but it was theirs, and that made it worth defending. Ruth banked the fire while Eliza secured the windows. Mary made coffee, her hands steady now, and Ethan sat at the table, writing another letter to his brother, documenting the night's events. Just in case tomorrow brought what they all feared it might, Curtis Malone came at dawn, bringing hellfire with him. Ethan woke to the acrid smell of smoke and Mary's scream. He grabbed his gun and boots, racing barefoot onto the porch. The barn was ablaze, flames licking hungry tongues toward the sky. In the firelight, He counted at least a dozen riders, Malone at their center like a general surveying his battlefield. "Harper," Malone's voice boomed across the yard. "Time's up. I've been patient, but my patience has limits." Ruth and Eliza emerged, both armed. The women had learned to sleep dress these past weeks, ready for trouble. It had come in full measure. "The livestock," Mary gasped, starting toward the barn. Ethan caught her arm. "It's too late." The screams of trapped animals confirmed his words. Their milk cow, the chickens, the few horses they'd managed to keep, all lost to the flames. "You bastard," Ruth snarled, raising her rifle. Now, Malone said calmly. "No need for unpleasantness. This is business. I have here a legal document, Josiah's debt to me. I'm foreclosing. You can leave peacefully or—" He gestured to his men. "All armed, all ready. That paper's worthless." Ethan said, "Even if it's real, I bought this place free and clear." "Did you?" Malone produced another document. "Funny thing about our friend Wade, seems he forgot to file your deed properly. Terrible oversight. According to county records, this land is still in Josiah's name, and his debts passed to his estate. We're his widows," Eliza said coolly. "His estate would pass to us." "Widows?" Malone laughed. "The law doesn't recognize plural marriage. Ladies, you're nothing but squatters. Trespassers. Lucky I don't have you arrested." The barn roof collapsed in a shower of sparks. Mary made a sound like a wounded animal. Those chickens had been hers, raised from chicks. The one thing she'd built herself in this place of sorrow. "Get off my land," Ethan said quietly. "Your land?" Malone leaned forward in his saddle. "Boy, you don't seem to understand. This isn't your land. Never was. I'm giving you one chance to walk away. Take it." "No." The word hung in the smoky air. Malone's men shifted, hands moving to weapons, the moment balanced on a knife's edge. Then hoofbeats thundered from the south. Sam Martinez and his vaqueros rode in hard, taking positions around the yard. From the east came the Hendersons' wagon with more neighbors. Even Tom Murphy appeared, looking shamefaced but determined. "Seems we're not the only early risers," Eliza observed. Malone's face darkened. "This doesn't concern you people. Go home before you get hurt." "A man's home burning concerns all neighbors," Sam said simply. "We stand with them. Against the law, I have legal papers. Papers can be examined." A new voice interrupted. A thin man in a dusty black suit rode through the smoke, spectacles glinting. "Jeremiah Whitman, attorney at law. Mr. Harper's brother sent me." Ethan felt a surge of hope. His letter had reached Lewis faster than expected. Whitman dismounted with lawyer's precision. "I'll need to see these documents, Mr. Malone, and the county records, and sworn depositions from all parties. This is none of your concern. Lawyer. On the contrary, I represent Mr. Harper's interests. And I must say, burning his barn before proving your claim seems precipitous, criminal, even. I'm sure Sheriff Daniels would agree." As if summoned, the sheriff appeared with his deputies. The yard was getting crowded now, the balance of power shifting. "Gentlemen," Daniels said tiredly, "it's too early for this much excitement. Malone, did you burn that barn?" "Lightning," Malone said blandly. "Tragic accident. Lightning from a clear sky. Remarkable." The standoff stretched taut. Malone had violence on his side, but now Ethan had law and community. Neither advantage was complete. "Perhaps," Whitman suggested, "we should settle this properly. In court. Let a judge examine these claims." "Courts take time," Malone growled. "Time costs money. Then you'd better be sure of your papers." Whitman smiled thinly. "Because false documents are fraud. And fraud, Mr. Malone, is a hanging offense in this territory." Something flickered in Malone's eyes. Fear? Calculation? He'd expected easy prey, not this resistance. "You've got 1 week," he said finally. 1 week to get your affairs in order. Then I'm coming back, and all the neighbors and lawyers in the world won't stop me." He wheeled his horse, his men following. But at the gate, he paused. That barn was just the beginning. Harper, ask yourself if these women are worth what's coming. After they left, the neighbors helped douse the barn's remains. Nothing could be saved. The animals were buried quickly, Mary weeping over each small grave. The loss was devastating. Not just property, but their means of survival. "I can file injunctions," Whitman said as they gathered in the house. "Delay things, but Malone's right about one thing. If that debt paper has any validity, it predates your purchase. The question becomes whether Wade's failure to disclose it voids the sale." English. Ruth demanded, "Do we have a chance or not?" "A chance, yes. But Malone has judges in his pocket. We need more than legal arguments. We need proof of fraud, intimidation, conspiracy. We need to fight back," Ethan said grimly. "Legally," Whitman warned. Anything else plays into his hands, but as the day wore on, fighting legally seemed increasingly impossible. Word came that Malone had bought up their credit at Patterson's store. The bank suddenly called in a loan Josiah had taken years ago. Even the water rights were challenged, Malone claiming prior usage. "He's strangling us," Eliza said that evening. They sat around the table, counting their remaining resources. Without the animals, without credit, they had maybe 2 weeks of supplies. "Let me go," Mary said suddenly. "If I leave, maybe—" "Don't," Ruth cut her off sharply. "Don't you dare. But I'm the youngest, the one they judge most. If you go, they'll just focus on Ruth," Ethan said. "Or Eliza, or me, for standing with you. This isn't about any one of us anymore." "Then what do we do?" Mary's voice broke. "How do we fight someone who owns everything?" "We don't fight him," Eliza said slowly. "We fight the system that gives him power." They all looked at her. She sat straight-backed, every inch the woman who'd survived 7 years with Josiah Crane. "Malone's power comes from fear. People fear his money, his influence. But what if they feared something else more? Such as the truth about Josiah, about what this town allowed, about what they're allowing now." She looked at each of them. "We've been hiding, ashamed, but shame gives them power over us. What if we stopped hiding? You want us to tell everyone?" Ruth couldn't finish. "Everything," Eliza confirmed. "Let them judge facts, not rumors." It was a desperate gambit. Truth against power. Honor against money. But as Ethan looked at these 3 women who'd already survived so much, he thought it might be their only chance. That night, while the others slept, Ethan found Mary on the porch, staring at the smoldering ruins of the barn. "I raised those chickens from eggs," she said softly. "Named them all. Silly, I know. Not silly, they were yours. First thing that ever was." She wiped her eyes. "Is it wrong that I hate him? Not just Malone. Josiah, too, even dead. I hate him for bringing us to this." "Hate's not wrong," Ethan said. "It's what you do with it that matters. What did you do with yours, after whatever sent you drifting all those years?" Ethan considered. "Buried it." "Thought I had, anyway. But being here, seeing what you 3 have endured, maybe I just ran from it." "Are you running now?" "No." The word came without hesitation. "Whatever happens, I'm done running." Mary turned to him then, starlight caught in her tear-bright eyes. "Neither am I. Not anymore." They stood together, watching the last embers die. Tomorrow they'd begin Eliza's plan. Strip away the veils of shame and let the town see the truth. It would either save them or destroy them entirely. But tonight, with Mary's quiet breathing beside him and the vast Texas sky overhead, Ethan felt something he hadn't in years. Not hope exactly, but determination. The will to stand and fight for something worth saving. The barn was gone. The animals were dead. They were nearly broke and thoroughly besieged. But they were still here, still together. And sometimes, that was victory enough. "We should go in," Mary said eventually. "Dawn comes early." "It does," Ethan agreed. But neither moved, drawing strength from shared silence and stubborn refusal to yield. Let Malone come. Let the town rage. They'd plant their feet and make their stand, because some things were worth the price of defending them. even if that price was everything they had. The courthouse in Cedar Ridge had never seen such a crowd. Every bench was packed, people standing along the walls. More gathered outside, pressing against the windows. The whole town had come to witness what the newspapers were calling the trial of the century, though it was merely a hearing about property rights. Ethan sat with his lawyer, Whitman, trying to project calm he didn't feel. Across the aisle, Curtis Malone lounged like a satisfied cat, surrounded by 3 attorneys from Dallas. The women sat behind Ethan, Eliza serene, Ruth defiant, Mary pale but determined. Judge Harrison, brought in from Austin to ensure impartiality, called for order. This hearing will determine the validity of competing claims to the property known as the Crane Ranch. Mr. Whitman, you may begin. Whitman stood, adjusting his spectacles. Your Honor, we intend to prove that Mr. Malone's claim is not only invalid but fraudulent, part of a pattern of intimidation and objection. Malone's lead attorney, Blackwood, interrupted, inflammatory and prejudicial. Mr. Whitman, the judge warned. Stick to facts. Very well. I call Eliza Crane to testify. A ripple went through the crowd as Eliza took the stand. She dressed carefully, respectable but not ostentatious. Every inch a lady despite what the town thought of her. Mrs. Crane, Whitman began, then corrected himself. Miss Eliza, tell us about your relationship with Josiah Crane. I was his wife, Eliza said clearly. Married in this courthouse 18 years ago. I have the certificate. And yet Mr. Crane took other wives. He did, without divorcing me, without my consent. Tell us about this supposed debt to Mr. Malone. Eliza's eyes found Malone in the crowd. Josiah gambled, but in his final years, he won more than he lost. The last time he played cards with Mr. Malone, Josiah won, substantially. The crowd murmured. Malone's face darkened. You're saying Malone owed Josiah money? $5,000. Josiah showed me the marker. Objection! Blackwood thundered. Hearsay! Where is this marker? Judge Harrison asked. Gone, Eliza admitted. Stolen from our house the night after Josiah died, along with other papers. Convenient. Blackwood sneered. The truth often is. Eliza replied coolly. Ruth testified next, describing the harassment they'd endured, the escalating violence. Then Mary took the stand, and the courtroom held its breath. Miss Mary, Whitman said gently, tell us how you came to live at the ranch. Mary's voice started as a whisper but grew stronger. My father owed gambling debts. Mr. Crane offered to forgive them if I married him. I was 17. You were sold, Whitman clarified. Objection. Characterization. Sustained, the judge said, though his expression had shifted. Did you consent to this marriage? What choice did I have? My family would have starved. Women in the gallery dabbed at their eyes. Even some men looked uncomfortable. After Josiah died, why did you stay? Mary lifted her chin. Where would I go? Back to a father who sold me? To a town that scorned me? The ranch was prison and refuge both. At least there. I had sisters who understood. Malone's attorneys tried to shake their testimony, but the women held firm. Then Whitman played his ace. I call Thomas Wade to the stand. The corrupt lawyer entered looking like a man headed to his own hanging. Under Whitman's relentless questioning, the truth emerged. Yes, Malone had paid him to conceal liens on the property. Yes, the debt document was forged poorly. Yes, Malone had ordered him to ensure the women had no legal recourse. He said they were just whores. Wade mumbled, said no one would care what happened to them. The word crashed through the courtroom like thunder. Several women rose to leave. Judge Harrison gavelled for order. Mr. Wade. Whitman pressed. Did Curtis Malone admit to burning the barn? Objection. I'll allow it. The judge ruled. Wade squirmed. He said fire was cleaner than bullets. The crowd erupted. Malone shot to his feet, face purple with rage. You lying weasel, you'll sit down. Mr. Malone, Judge Harrison commanded, or be held in contempt. When order was restored, Ethan took the stand. He spoke simply, honestly, about buying the ranch, finding the women, choosing to stand with them. Why? Whitman asked. Why risk everything for strangers? Ethan found Mary's eyes in the crowd. Because right is right. Because good men failed these women once, I wouldn't be another. Blackwood's cross-examination was brutal. Mr. Harper, are you romantically involved with any of these women? No. Yet you live with 3 women who aren't your relatives. I live on the same property. We're business partners. Partners. Blackwood's tone dripped contempt. Is that what you call it? I call it what it is. 3 women trying to survive and 1 man with enough decency to help them. Or 1 man taking advantage. Enough, Judge Harrison interrupted. Mr. Blackwood, unless you have relevant questions about property law, move on. The closing arguments were passionate. Blackwood painted the women as temptresses who'd manipulated both Josiah and Ethan. Whitman spoke of justice, survival, and the courage to stand against powerful men who thought they could take whatever they wanted. Judge Harrison retired to chambers. The crowd waited, tension thick as summer honey. Ethan felt Mary's hand slip into his, hidden by the bench back. On his other side, Ruth gripped his shoulder. 20 minutes later, the judge returned. The court finds Curtis Malone's claim to be fraudulent. The forged documents constitute criminal fraud, and this matter will be referred to the territorial prosecutor. As for the property itself, he paused, studying the packed courtroom. Josiah Crane's marriages after the first were indeed invalid. However, Texas recognizes common law marriage under certain conditions. These women lived as wives, were known as wives, and suffered as wives, in the absence of legal heirs. And considering Mr. Crane's intestate death, I find they have legitimate claim to the estate. The crowd exploded, cheers and boos in equal measure. Malone had to be restrained by deputies. Furthermore, the judge continued, Mr. Harper's purchase from the estate is hereby validated. The property is his, to do with as he wishes. Ethan stood immediately. Your Honor, I wish to deed quarter shares to each of these women, equal partners in the ranch. The judge's eyebrows rose. You're certain? Never been more certain of anything. Then it shall be so recorded. Outside the courthouse, the town divided like the Red Sea. Some congratulated them. Others turned away. But Sam Martinez pumped Ethan's hand. The Hendersons embraced Eliza. And even Tom Murphy muttered something about justice served. We did it, Mary breathed, disbelieving. We actually won. Battle's won, Ruth corrected, ever practical. War's not over. Malone has friends, influence. Let him come, Ethan said. We've got the law now, and each other. They climbed into their wagon for their ranch, and headed home. The burned barn was ugly testimony to what they'd endured. But it could be rebuilt. Everything could be rebuilt now. That evening, as spring sunset painted the sky, they gathered on the porch. Whitman had returned to Austin to file the paperwork. The ranch was quiet, peaceful for the first time in memory. What now? Mary asked. Now we build. Eliza said, really build, not just survive. Together, Ruth added. And for once, her voice held no edge, only hope. Ethan looked at these 3 remarkable women who'd become his partners, his friends, perhaps someday something more. The future stretched ahead, full of possibility. I know a man in San Antonio, he said, runs cattle drives to Kansas, good money if we can raise a herd. We'll need hands. Ruth said practically, Sam's vaqueros might hire on. Eliza suggested. They respect strength, and we've proven that. They talked late into the night, planning dreams that finally seemed possible. A new barn, expanded gardens, maybe even a school for the valley's children, with Eliza teaching. When the others retired, Mary lingered. Ethan, what you did today, deeding us shares. Why? You earned it. All of you, blood and tears and courage. That's not what I mean. Ethan met her eyes, saw the question there. Ask me again in a year, he said softly. When we're not partners but neighbors. When you're free to choose without obligation. Mary smiled. Sunrise after long darkness. A year then. She went inside, leaving Ethan alone with the vast Texas night. Somewhere a coyote called, but it sounded less lonely now. The stars wheeled overhead, witnessing this strange new family forged from loss and determination. Tomorrow would bring work, hard, honest work building something worthwhile. There would be challenges, setbacks, small-minded people who'd never accept them. But tonight, Ethan Harper sat on the porch of his ranch, their ranch, and felt something he'd thought lost forever. Peace, home, and just maybe, the beginning of love. The empty spaces in his life were filling, not with what he'd expected, but with something better. 3 widows' gifts, courage, wisdom, and hope, had transformed a lonely drifter into a man with purpose. It was enough, more than enough. It was everything. Thank you for listening to this story. I'd love to know where you're enjoying these tales from the Wild West. Whether you're listening at home, during your commute, or somewhere else entirely. Please subscribe to the From Wild West channel and share your thoughts in the comments below. Your feedback and experiences mean the world to us.